But then, you have to think about this and realize that this is the same Srimad Bhagavatam that provides us with the majestic descriptions of the fifth canto, the beautiful Vedic cosmology and cosmography, absolutely stunning descriptions of the workings of the planetary systems and so on. It's the same Srimad Bhagavatam that gives us the breathtaking poetry of the 10th canto, and this penetrating vision of love and the nature of love and the different dimensions of love. And so we have to reconcile this somehow. So if you choose not to just dismiss this as a bunch of religious mumbo jumbo, and if you say, all right, well, how do we give such descriptions the benefit of the doubt? Right, so let's look at it from a sympathetic point of view and see where that takes us. And by the way, I do not intend to take up the whole class with this. I know we're here to celebrate Srila Prabhupada in this auspicious day. So, and I have put aside some Prabhupada stories. Everyone seems to enjoy Prabhupada stories. So we'll get to those in a moment. So I said, okay, well, how do we reconcile these things? How do we reconcile this intellectually profound, poetic, brilliant insight into the nature of creation with these rather shallow, apparently shallow stories? And then, so the first thing I did was, reflecting and saying, you know what, this really isn't so different today. And I went to the New York Times just as an exercise. This is yesterday's Times. I haven't read today's yet. And just as an experiment. So I went through it and I looked at some of the articles here. I don't know if you can see it. But front page, what do we have? Well, we have a court case that brings charges of sex crimes against the former governor of New York State. All right, well, that's a rather elevated position in government. And we're having to deal with sex crimes. Front page news here. Then I looked down here and saw another article. The Human Rights Council appointed an expert to investigate abuses in Sudan since the military seized power on October 25th. So we have abuses by high-ranking government officers in another part of the world. And the first column, in the New York Times, the most important articles in the far right-hand column. So the number one article yesterday is talking about how there's a surge in hiring that tends to provide evidence that the economy is coming back after the pandemic. The economy in the United States is on the rise again. And you read the following paragraph. The world is normalizing, said Brian Moynihan, the chief executive of Bank of America. We're winning the war on the virus in Europe and North America, knock on wood. Consumers are spending a lot of money and people are traveling, going to hotels and taking vacations. Well, okay. So on the one hand, you can look at that and say, yeah, good news. People are spending more and they're going on vacations. Is that good news? Is that actually progress? Or are we seeing a kind of contemporary version of the same kind of behavior that we're reading about in this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Then on further reflection, it occurred to me that we're only really reading about one particular incident for the most part in the lives of each of the individuals described here in this 9th canto. They're people, they're human beings who led long lives. And this particular Bhagavatam is using a specific instance from this longer life that is filled with all kinds of other activities and accomplishments and insights and realizations to make a particular point. And if you read in the preface to the original India edition of Srila Prabhupada's first canto Bhagavatam, we learned there that on other planets, there are millions of volumes, millions of cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have a limited version, a smaller version of the wisdom of the Bhagavatam here on earth. We're looking at a particular incident in a much longer life in each of these instances where people are being pointed out for their embarrassing behavior or whatever the case may be. And in most instances, the people involved become wiser, as a consequence of these actions and these strange sexual malfeasances and kind of wanton abuse of power and so on that we're reading about here. In most instances, the protagonists in these stories get better. For example, the story of Parsuram is there, who killed off so many generations of Kshatriya soldiers, but then became very introspective, very reflective, and went to the mountains and engaged, to this day, according to the descriptions in Bhagavatam, is engaged in deep meditation and reflection. So I think that's the point here, is that we become wiser. And so we can dismiss this if we choose, but that I think would be a shallow reading of what's going on here. When you write scripts, my day job is as a biographer, and sometimes I've written scripts as well as books. When you depict characters, when you try to create interest in someone, you ask difficult questions. You ask, what's their pain? What's this person's? What is the thing that happened to this person to make them the way they are today? Was there something they didn't get in childhood? Was there some separation that took place? Was there an awkward parenting experience? There's in psychology, there are different kinds of affection. There's solid affection. There's varying affections. And if a child does not have substantial affection, then it means that child may be very, very hesitant to assert himself or herself later in life, because you don't know if you have permission to do anything. So there's a reflection in later behavior predicated on those experiences early in life. And unfortunately, we don't always have the background to these characters, but we can at least pose the question. What was it in their lives that compelled them to behave the way they did? And if we do that, we become a little bit more sympathetic to their stories, to their backstories. There's that Native American saying, don't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. Very often that's misquoted as walking a mile in someone's shoes, but it's originally a Native American aphorism. Don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. So the same is true here. If you have people who, again, from this very brief description of their behavior, act in ways that are repulsive, or they seem childish, or worse, hurtful. We're compelled by our Vaishnava faith to not judge things on their surface appearance. That's the whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita, is do not judge by appearances. It's the entire teaching of Bhagavad Gita is Krishna telling Arjuna, stop judging your situation here by its surface appearance. Go deeper inside what you're seeing here, and you will find that spiritual core. So the same is true, I think, in these stories from Bhagavatam, that we're compelled to go deeper, to not just dismiss them as somehow religious folk tales and mythology, but to go deeper. Okay, so I've hopefully dodged the bullet, as they say, in these rather when who was it who invited me to give the class? When I first read the verse, I said, "Boy, he's got a wicked sense of humor." You know, he's like, wow.
You should have done.
Yeah, you should. I thought, you should have done. Thanks a lot, Prabhu. Thank you. And I could kind of hear him chortling in his lassi. Let's see what Yogi's going to do with this one. So, okay, let's talk about Srila Prabhupada. Over the years, people have asked me to can you tell Prabhupada stories? Everyone loves Prabhupada stories. So I started writing them down. Someday I'll do a memoir. I know that's in my future. I have to do that. I've been avoiding it, but it'll happen. So some memories, and to tell you the truth, these memories have sustained me. There have been times over the years. I mean, I'm 71 now. I was 19 when I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada. So more than a half century in Krishna consciousness. And there are times when these memories really have kept me alive, when things look very dark, very bleak. I was able to draw on my time with him. I was very fortunate, very, very lucky. I'm one of the few people who can do that, who can say, yes, I spent many weeks traveling with Prabhupada, and we discussed this, we discussed that, and I got to observe him with other people. That was a tremendous learning experience, watching how he interacted with different kinds of guests and scholars and dignitaries and everyday people. It was really quite an experience. So I've made some notes. Going back to, let's say, the first time I saw Prabhupada was a photograph. It was a photograph of Srila. And it's the photo that you may be familiar with, where there's a chadar that's been hung on the wall behind him, and he has his hand in his bead bag, and he's sitting in lotus position on a mattress, and he has this very, very sober expression. And this photo was on a little altar that devotees had set up in Paris, where I was a student back in 1969. And I asked the devotees who had invited me back to their hotel room. They lived in a hotel room, and they said, come on back for lunch. So I went back, and I looked at their altar, and I looked at this photo, and I said, why is your teacher so sad? He looks so sad. And Umapati kind of smiled patiently and said, you think he's sad? That's because you don't understand the nature of ecstasy. Okay, he had me from hello. I was already engaged. What does this mean? I don't understand ecstasy. Now I've got a homework assignment. I have to understand ecstasy. So that was my first impression. This is very grave, very sober, and yet at the same time he's in ecstasy. I wanted to know what that was all about. Then, of course, when I finally got to meet Srila Prabhupada, I was the first one in the room. He looked down at me. I was seated on the floor, gave him my prostrated obeisances. I'd never met him before. I was initiated, but never met him. And he was sitting on a bench in a waiting room in the Air India offices in Paris. And he looked down at me. Didn't blink, just looked at me like this. And I'm looking up at him and saying, oh, this is getting really serious. And that expression, if I had to put words to it, I would say it was as though he was saying to me, are you ready for this? Are you really prepared for what's about to happen here? This is a lifetime commitment. Are you ready for this? And the tears started streaming down my cheeks, and it was memorable, marked me permanently. that gaze, that unblinking gaze. He looked straight through to me. Many people will tell you this, that when they first met Prabhupada, it was as though that you were standing naked. You couldn't hide behind any defenses or excuses or ego games. He saw right to your soul. He knew your condition. He knew where you came from. He knew why you were here. He knew the challenges you were facing. And along with that sense of this is really getting serious now, was a simultaneous, I would call it an attenuating emotion, which was, I don't know who this person is, but one thing I know, he will never hurt me. There's nothing this person would ever do that would hurt me. And I don't think I'd ever felt that. I felt that with my mom, I guess. But it was a sense of absolute shelter that it won't be easy. But nothing good ever came easy. And this person won't allow harm to come to me. There was a sense of confidence just being in his presence. So I'm trying to convey to you, those of you who did not have the privilege of being with him, what it was like to be with Srila Prabhupada. And there was a sense of shelter, a sense of being with someone who will always look out for you. It's always got your back. Whatever difficulty you get into, one way or another, he will communicate to you and give you the information and the guidance that you require. It was an extraordinary, mystical emotion that took place at that moment. Then in Paris, we were on a morning walk, and by this time, this was a few years later, I had already been president of the temple and involved with the publishing work in Europe. And devotees, younger devotees, were coming to me all the time asking for advice. There was one question I never knew how to answer. So I asked Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, what should I tell younger devotees who come to me and they say they don't understand the nature of their relationship with you because you're always traveling. And so they don't get to have the kind of conversations that I'm privileged to have with you because I travel with you. And so they're uncertain about the nature of their relationship with you. And he asked me, so what do you tell them? I said, well, I say they shouldn't feel bereft of a relationship with you. You've invested yourself in your books. You are personally present in your teachings, in your books. And if they read the books attentively, they'll find that relationship with you. And he sort of nodded in appreciation of that. And he said, you should also ask them if they're chanting their 16 rounds. Well, that struck me as unusual. I said, why would that question help them understand that they have a personal relationship with you? And he said, if someone is not following the basic teachings that I've given, where's there any question of a closer relationship? Very revealing answer. You earn the privilege of a deeper relationship. You don't assume it. You don't presume to step into a more intimate exchange with your spiritual master. That's a privilege that you have to earn. And very often it's earned by service and by the adherence to the basic principles. And once you've achieved that, it's called sthai bhava, that steadiness in devotional service, then the deeper levels will reveal themselves. You won't even have to ask for them. They'll be revealed to you. So that was a moment that I recall vividly. On that same morning walk, there was a devotee who asked Srila Prabhupada, why is it that we say that material life is an illusion, that it's like a dream? He says, we call this world Maya, but it seems so real. I mean, I can touch it, I can smell it, I can see it. It seems so real to me. why do we say this is like an illusion? And Prabhupada asked him, at night, when you go to sleep, do you have dreams? And this devotee said, yes, I dream at night. And Prabhupada said, the only reason why your daytime dream seems more real to you than your nighttime dream is that you spend more hours awake. So we spend a lot of hours awake in this daytime dream. So it seems very real to us. And the Bhakti theology says that it is real. Mayavad ideology says that there's no reality, there's no substance to it. It's all illusion. It's all Maya. We're not Mayavadis. We accept that the material creation is real, just as the spiritual creation is real. It may be a temporary reality, but it is nonetheless real. So that was an important brief exchange. And that's the kind of thing that happened. Srila Prabhupada was marvelous at taking any occasion, any question, any situation, and really digging into it and surfacing some spiritual truth, some takeaway that you didn't have before. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. And I mean, I could go on with other stories, but we've already discussed quite a bit here today. We've discussed this marvelous, joyful, fun, penetrating, memorable story from the 9th canto. And then we've also had a chance to talk about some Prabhupada pastimes. So if it's all the same to you, I'd like to open this up to your questions and allow you to jump in here. If you have comments that you'd like to offer, or if you have questions you'd like to ask, I'm at your service. So how should we do this, Prabhu? Do we get questions in the chat box, or do we let people unmute their mics?
Yeah, devotees can unmute themselves. Yeah,
Okay.
Devotees jump in, take advantage.
Okay. So jump right in.
Yeah, wonderful presentation. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare
You'll have to
Krishna,
tell me because I don't
Yogeshvara
see everybody. So you tell me if someone's asking a question, okay?
Yeah, Andrea, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ananda Barhari Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Yogeshvara Prabhu. My question is, I would love to hear some of your stories of you experiencing how Srila Prabhupada was with his Vaishnavi disciples and his way of being with even just regular women that weren't Vaishnavis. I would love to get your insight on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Sometimes we come across a comment like this one in the 9th canto, where Prabhupada says that a woman can't be happy without the shelter of a man. Okay, well, a few things I can offer you to maybe calm the waters here. First of all, if you take, 10 words in that one sentence, and if someone decides that, aha, this is Prabhupada's policy, right? He may have written and spoken 10 million words, but someone decides to focus on these 10 words, and they blow it up out of proportion, and that becomes policy. Well, that's their prerogative if they want to do that, but I think it's foolish, and I think it's dangerous, and it's certainly wrong. It's not policy. It's a particular position at a particular moment in a particular story with a particular purpose, right? And if you don't acknowledge that, then you really need to ask yourself, why am I so fixated on wanting to make this into policy? What is it about me, about my prejudicial, biased, misogynistic, stupid attitude toward women that wants to take this one sentence and say, this is Prabhupada's position toward women, right? So let's start with that. Then, more directly to your question, when I was with him, I learned a lot from him about how to be respectful toward everyone. to the truth, tell you truthfully, I don't think I saw a difference. I don't think he made the difference when he was with men disciples or when he was with women disciples. It was the same. It was absolutely the same. It's not that he went out of his way. I mean, occasionally, if he saw that some of his men disciples were being foolish and they were being disrespectful to one of his female disciples, he would go out of his way to stop them and say, what are you doing? And then, like one time in India, Prabhupada was driving somewhere. All the sannyasis pile into the car. And Yamuna is standing there. Prabhupada looks at her and says, aren't you coming? And she says, well, there's no room, Srila Prabhupada. So he kicks one of the sannyasis out of the passenger seat and says, come sit next to me. He would invite women disciples to give class. He would invite them into discussions because he was always asking us our opinion. So he would very often ask them their opinion of things. I cannot tell you that ever, not once in the months that I was with him in his personal presence, did I ever perceive any differentiation in his behavior toward men and women. There was an inequality. If anything, sometimes he would go out of his way because he knew that men were mistreating women. So he would be overly protective on occasion. But that's not because he felt that women were somehow weak and stupid and unable to live life on their own. That, again, I really think we have to be cautious here because there are many people who will choose to focus on the specifics of a particular instruction or a particular statement, and other people who will take a statement within the larger context. Recently, it was my privilege to author a 30-page document called the ISKCON Code of Ethical Behavior, which on August 21st was ratified and voted into law by the GBC. In large measure, I took the 2 years that it took me to draft this code of ethical behavior because of what I saw being done to women in the society. And what I knew was the difference between that behavior and Srila Prabhupada's behavior. So now the challenge is to get the code recognized. I mean, there are a lot of laws on the law books. People don't know about them until a lawyer drags them out in a court case and presents them in a court of law. I think we need to do better than that with this code of ethical behavior. But so I could go on about this at length, and I don't want to do that. I want to give other people a chance to ask their questions. But as a concise answer to you, you could not have hoped for a better example of someone who offered respect to all, regardless of their sex, gender, sexual orientation, caste, plumbing. I mean, you name it. He was equitable toward everyone. And some other time, I'll give you more examples of how he did that. Let's see I hope that's all right.
Yeah, we see that Andrea is very satisfied that the sannyasi got thrown out of the car and Jamuna Devi was... yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear that too often in the Bhagavatam class.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions, devotees? Okay, Adipusha Prabhu, you want to say something?
Not that I have something to say, but just repeating like Yogeshvara Prabhu just did, repeating Srila Prabhupada's offerings to us. This statement about a person appreciating and the protection. And that we all, it's not just that it's putting someone down to say that they're benefiting by having someone caring for them, guiding them. We all need that.
Yes, thank you, Adi. Adi, it's great to see you again. You've just said something so beautiful. We all need protection. We all need protection. Good reminder.
If it's raining and there's a roof, why not go under the roof? You know, and not think, oh, you think I need a roof? Well, what's wrong with having a roof? You know, it's not against anyone. And then the other thing is, how does a person who's being offered protection perceive that? Is it oppression? Is it coercion? Is it manipulation? It is, you know, or is it love? You know, and if a person is intelligence, the first criteria is, I'm not a woman. That story with Vishaka Mataji was with the morning walk, and one sannyasi said, Prabhupada, is it true women are 9 times more lusty than men? Prabhupada said, yes. Is it true that women are less intelligent than men? Prabhupada said, yes. And then Mother Vishaka was just there going, oh my. And then he said to her, aren't you glad you're not a woman? Problem is, I think I'm a woman. You know, and actually the feminine aspect, we are compared to, there's only one Purusha, there's only one supreme enjoyer, and we're all feminine in the sense that we're meant to give pleasure to Krishna.
Yeah, that's it. I think the problem is that some of us think we're men.
And then there's a guy with a horse over there. If you look in the, see that horse? He said yesterday, you know, what we need is good men. I mean, if you're in a position as a father, as a husband, as a leadership person, but you're not qualified to be respectful, to be respected. That's the problem. You have not inspired people to understand that you're willing to die for them, that you're not trying to manipulate them. Or Prabhupada said, I love you means I love you for you, not for what I get from you. So if you have a person of that caliber, then the natural tendency will be, well, thank you very much. And well, what do you think about this? And I think Gail wants to talk. Gail, please let her speak.
Very good. Thank you, Adi. Beautiful.
Prabhupada.
Some other questions or comments that
Gail wants
our
to
guests
speak.
here would like to ask?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yes, this is Gail. I do have a question that arose when you were telling the story about the disciple who wanted to understand how to get closer to Srila Prabhupada.
Mm-hmm.
And Srila Prabhupada's response was, well, if he's not following the basics, then what's the point of asking how to get closer? And so that made me think of people who, now since Srila Prabhupada has departed, it made me think of, I know so many devotees who were not chanting 16 rounds and were not even seriously, looking for a spiritual master. Yet they got, that mystical realization that so many devotees get about who their spiritual master was. So I'm just wondering, why would certain devotees get that very firm conviction about who their spiritual master is before they have even become seriously committed to chanting 16 rounds, and before they might have even, seriously aspired to seek the shelter of a spiritual master?
Very good question. Part of the answer is available in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna, Yoga Brashta Vijayate. Someone may recognize their spiritual master because they're picking up where they left off from their previous life. And so there's some acknowledgement there. We can't know that for certain, so that's not the kind of thing you want to lean too heavily on. But certainly I know people, some of my God sisters and God brothers, who are they just take so naturally to Krishna consciousness. Mother Yamuna was like that. She was just so transcendental. There was something so inspiring about her. It's reasonable to conjecture that these are great souls who had come very far in their previous lives, and they had already settled up things that wish to challenge us, whether it's sexual confusions, or whether it's egotistical desire for attention or accomplishment, whatever it may be. There's some people I know, I'm very convinced that they dealt with these things in previous lives. So they're able to focus on their devotional service in this lifetime, and they don't seem to be distracted the way other people are who haven't progressed as far as they have. But another thing to bear in mind, and I ask you to consider this very carefully, what you perceive may not necessarily be what's happening. So that someone may give the appearance of being very proficient in their devotional life, very unconcerned with what we call material attachments, whether it's bad habits or addictions or distractions of one kind or another. So the appearance may be, our perception of that person may be that they're on a very smooth devotional path. The reality may be quite different. That same person may be looking at you and saying, my gosh, how does she do that? I wish I had her determination. I wish I had her love for the deities. I wish I had her steadiness in kirtan or in japa. So we just have to be a little cautious about how we perceive someone, and always keep in mind that the reality may be different from what we're seeing. So it's a big topic. I thank you for your question, but maybe that's enough of a suggested answer so that we could give someone else a chance as well here. But thank you for that.
And thank you for your answer. Thank you very much.
There's a comment in the chat box from Jamuna Jaya. I love the discussion, Jamuna Jaya says. It's hubris to think that we don't need protection. All of us need protection, and how wonderful Krishna gives it so willingly and freely. Then Bhima Prabhu says, my stallions, gelts, protect my mares. The mares love them for it. They all protect each other. Bhima Prabhu's comment.
Yeah.
Bell says, Hare Krishna, thank you so much for your service. This was so wonderful. Okay, do we have a question or a comment? If not, I'll ask my question. Okay, I take the liberty. Yogeshvara Prabhu, so you've been around since 1969. You experienced Prabhupada's physical presence, and then after Prabhupada externally departed from this planet, so was there an instance in your life where Prabhupada, after his physical departure from this world, appeared in your life, or maybe interfered or guided you through a dark period in your life? Maybe you mentioned briefly in the beginning. Could you tell us a little bit how Prabhupada saved you? Maybe?
Well, I think a more accurate way of phrasing that question would be to ask, has there ever been a moment when he hasn't appeared to guide me in my life? I can't give you chapter and verse on this, but my preference is to believe that Srila Prabhupada is personally looking out for me at every moment. And I have conversations with him. I mean, I have conversations with my Gaura deities as well. I think that's a great privilege that we have in Krishna consciousness, that we don't depend on the physical presence in order to sustain and nurture a relationship. You know, materially, if the person you love isn't with you, then the relationship dries up. It can go away. Spiritually, that's not an impediment. You know, from within the heart, kriddhi. The presence in sound vibration teachings, as the antaryami, the witness within. We're never alone. We're never without the company. Prabhupada used to say that about his spiritual master. He says, I am always with my spiritual master and following his instructions. And that's not just sentiment. That's a real, palpable, living, breathing presence. It's extraordinary how it happens. But the more you allow your spiritual master into your heart, the more you will experience your spiritual master's presence constantly, uninterrupted.
Thank
Gail
you.
had a question there.
She already asked, yeah, unless she has another one. Yeah, Bhima Prabhu says, excellent answer. When has there been not a moment when Prabhupada hasn't been in my life? Yogeshvara Prabhu, that's a wonderful takeaway for all of us from this class. A powerful one-liner. Thank you.
Well, I'm always honored to be with my spiritual family at the Bhakti Center. And I thank you for your hospitality and your interest and your contribution to our discussion here this morning.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any final questions, comments? Anyone?
If nobody else has, then I do have one more.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I also think that it's such an amazing aspect of our Krishna consciousness movement that we can have a relationship with the spiritual master even after he physically departs, and that it can be even deeper than when he was physically present. But so maybe you can, even though I do feel that that's so special, maybe you can help me understand how, just, you know, because we say that Vani is a little bit more important than the Vapu, I guess for that reason. But how do I understand? Maybe I will have to wait for my own experience to answer this, but I'm wondering how to understand that by remembering the spiritual master's Vani, that's not like a dry experience. Because when we think of the affection of somebody, we think of, you know, that affection coming through their body language, for example, the loving way, the affectionate way that they look at you, their tone of voice. But to get that from just Vani, it seems like without that body language, it seems like the Vani would be more on the drier level, you know. So how to help me understand that you could experience even more affection when the person isn't physically present to give that body language?
Think of it this way. I'll give you an example from my life. My mom passed away about a year ago, and we were together she died, she was 95. She had me when she was 25. So we were together for 70 years. Not everyone has such a close, loving relationship with a parent for so long. So losing her was like, feeling like it was like the end of the world, like I was being ripped in half. And as I remember her, I think back, well, when I was little, and let's say when I was 5 years old, she was 30 years old. And I have photographs. I remember her from those days. She played tennis and she was very vivacious, and we would go to movies together and theater and listen to music. And then I got a little bit older, and let's say she was 50. She wasn't playing tennis anymore, but we would go to the opera or to poetry readings or different things, jazz concerts. Then she retired from work. She was a media consultant. And then when she got to be about 75 or so, it started to get a little bit difficult for her to even get out. And by the time she was 90, she wasn't even leaving her apartment anymore, you know. And then by the time she was 93, she didn't get out of bed very much. You know, she didn't change her clothes. It was too much of an effort. So she was in her nightgown most of the day. Which physical form should I be meditating on? And after a while, it became very clear to me that the physical form wasn't really important. What I remembered was the loving exchange that was going on always. There was the same sense of total trust, total openness and ability to talk about anything together. And that was true when she was 40 and when she was 90. So the physical form, after a while, kind of got fuzzy around the edges, and the love became central. So when I think of Srila Prabhupada, I think, you know, because I've written a biography about him and I have all of these photographs when he was a young man. And I meditate on him as a young man, meeting his spiritual master when he was with Adi, help me, was he 22 or 23? And then, you know, later, 70, came to America. And then, you know, at age, 81. So the physical form was always changing, but there was this essence of a lover of God. The first time I met Srila Prabhupada in Paris, the very first time, he called me into his room. And he was sitting on a cushion and his eyes were closed, and he was kind of running his finger around his head, almost like he was tracing the patterns of his thoughts. And he said, Yogeshvara Prabhu, he called me Yogeshvara Prabhu. He said, throughout my entire life, he says, I've never forgotten Krishna. Even when I was a child, I had my dolls, and he opened his eyes and he had his hand in his bead bag, right? So he stuck his finger out like this from about this far off the floor to show me how tall his deities were when he was a boy. He was always loving Krishna. So whether when he was in the form of a child or in the form of my guru in his 70s, that love for Krishna was the constant throughout. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm loving these questions. All of you are asking such wonderful questions. And thank you again. I'm a little sensitive to the time. I know some of you have to get to work and so on. So I don't want to overextend my invitation here. So thank you all so very much. Thank you very much for allowing me to be with you today.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Thank you, Yogeshvara Prabhu. Thanks everyone for contributing to class, for keeping your cameras on. Matthew, Sava, Andrea, Gail, thank you for participating actively. Yogeshvara Prabhu, it was wonderful, very touching. We see your devotion. We just see how devoted you are to Srila Prabhupada after so many years. Thank you very much for inspiring us by your example. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Haribol.
Everyone have
a good day.
Okay. Hare Krishna.